Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from anthonymorganti.com, and this is episode 92 of Photo Critiques. And in Photo Critiques, people send me in some of their best work, and I critique each shot with suggestions on how they can improve it. And today I'm pleased to critique the work of Chris Decker. Chris sent me in some nice shots. This first one of the dog, I always talk about in all the critiques, whenever you're photographing anything with eyes, it could be a person, a dog, a cat, a spider, anything that has eyeballs, the eyeballs have to be in perfect focus, and Chris did a great job on this shot. As you can see in the dog's eyes, they're in perfect focus. As a matter of fact, the entire dog is really well focused. Very nice job. One note, Chris exposed this very good. If you are photographing a black animal, I have a black lab. If you're photographing a black cat, black dogs, black anything that's black, even a black caterpillar, the exposure is tricky on those because your camera is always going to tend to try to make those absolute blacks gray. So it wants to make it grayer than it is. And what will happen is it will overexpose the dog, of course, and it overexposes everything else in the scene. So Chris did a really nice job of balancing the exposure here. It's even harder if you're using a flash. Your camera again wants to make the black, a mid-gray, so it's going to put out more flash than it actually needs when you're using a TTL flash, so it's going to overexpose. So in those cases, if you're photographing a black dog, you might want to use some negative exposure compensation, or if you're using the flash, use some negative flash compensation. And what I mean by that is you just put out less power on the flash. Usually you could control that through your camera, and you could put, in third of stops, less, you got to take some test shots. It depends on the environment and your flash too. You might have to bring it down a third of a stop, or 2/3 of a stop, something like that, and to expose it right. Also, as I mentioned, with the camera, if you're not using a flash, you might have to bring exposure down a little bit. If when you take the shot, the dog looks like gray and it should be black. Now in this particular composition, we have this railing coming out here, and it's just distracting. And this isn't like a wildlife shot, where you're out in Botswana and you're photographing a lion. You can't move the lion somewhere else to take a better shot, but you could take the dog into a better area to give him a more attractive backdrop to take the shot with. So in this case, get the dog away from this railing here, and you probably could get a better shot doing everything you just did. The other thing is, when you're photographing in a scene like this, the tiles are very, very light. And what you'll find is your camera won't have enough dynamic range to capture the light tiles and the dark dog. Something's going to suffer. Either the light part's going to be blown out, or the dark parts are going to be just inky black. And when I say that, here's the highlights. When I hover over this triangle, if anything was blown out, it would turn red, and you can see nothing's turning red, so nothing is blown out. When it's blown out, there's no detail in that area. That means there's no data. It's just totally white. Then conversely, now when I hover over the shadow area, it's clipping. As you can see, these blue, when it shows the blue on the dog, that's absolute ink black. There's no detail in that at all. So it's hard to do because, as I mentioned, your camera does not have enough dynamic range to record the scene, so you have to keep that in mind. You take the dog into a different environment where you don't have these light tiles, something more mid-tone, and you'd be able to capture more detail throughout the entire dog by taking them somewhere, out in the lawn or something that's more mid-tone, not uniformly light like the tiles of the floor are. So keep that in mind for compositional reasons, especially if you're filming a difficult subject like a black dog, a black cat, anything that's really, really dark. It takes a little more thought on how to expose it properly, and you have to take into account the scene it's in, so that you expose everything properly, the scene, the dog, everything else. And the only other final little tip is you got all the dog in, kind of barely. This tails out a little bit. Unless you're getting a head and shoulder shot of the dog, you want to get the entire dog in. So back up just a little more so you got the entire dog in the shot. Give a little more space than you offered here. because as I mentioned many times, if you're going to print, if you print an 8 by 10, it's going to crop. You have to crop it, so you're going to have to, hopefully you bring it somewhere where you could actually move the frame around so you could crop it where you want, more over here and less over here, so you're not cutting off most of the tail. The other alternative is you get like an 8 by 12 done. That costs more though. So, and you have to find an odd frame for an 8 by 12, stuff like that. So, just take these things into consideration when you're setting up the scene. This interesting shot of the flower. It's almost like selective color because the background is almost black and white. I mean, almost gray, I should say. But there is some color, in the background. I was looking at this when I was going through the images initially, and it's 1/60th of a second f of 4.5, but the ISO is 640. So the reason why the aperture is, very wide open, and it's 1/60th of a second, which is a relatively slow shutter speed, but the ISO is so high, it's because the background is so strongly lit. So it's very strong backlight. And for Chris to expose this properly, he had to use a really high ISO. And using the real high ISO, he did what he set out to do. He's got the flower pretty much exposed properly. But the problem is, using the high ISO, you lose detail. So it's a little noisy, and we're losing some detail, especially when you have reds and stuff like those really saturated colors. They tend to look odd when you use a high ISO. So my suggestion is you work the scene a little differently, and in this case you might want to get in close and try to eliminate as much of this background as you can. Maybe just do a macro of the middle of the flower, or do something with the edges of the petals, or get a different idea, different angles. I don't know if this is a plant has any flowers facing the other way, so you could flip all the way around and shoot 180 degrees the other way and eliminate this really bright area. The whole goal here is to get your ISO down as low as it could go, like around 100. The other alternative is, if you still want to take the same exact shot, if you have a flash, your camera has a pop-up flash, use it. Don't, just because it's daytime, it doesn't mean you can't use the flash. It will serve as a fill flash. So you pop it up, set your ISO at 100, and take a flash shot of this. Now that could have been a flash shot actually, because 1/60th of a second is a typical shutter speed for flash. So it is possible that Chris did use a flash on this. If he did, then just bring that ISO down to 100, because your flash is just going to put out more power then, and it would you'd have a lot more detail in this flower if you did that. This is an interesting shot too. I like the tree. I like the idea you're going for. It's a very interesting tree. The only problem really with the shot compositionally is the cars. You got the cars here, so you want to minimize the things that are distracting in the shot. So the cars, if you could move this car, preferably if you know whose car that is, ask them to move it, work from a different angle, something, try to get the tree. Also, a little bit of the tree's cut out. You'd like to get the whole tree in the frame. The thing is too, when image like this is heavily processed, it happens usually with trees and things, is you get this glow around here, and typically that is because the clarity was too high, and sharpening might have been too high, and contrast was too high. So what you want to do is back those down, unless you're going for some type of art idea that you have that you want this glow, then by all means do it. But if you want to avoid the glow, you got to bring all those down. A lot of times you get that glow if you're using a plug-in after you developed it in Lightroom, and you use a plugin and you're sending it over to, like, Nik Silver Effects Pro or one of these plugins to do the black and white. Once the plugin does its thing, you get this glow. And what I found is you could eliminate that and still get a really great shot. Is just before you send it over to the plugin, bring clarity way down, bring contrast down, and sharpen it later. Don't do any sharpening at all. So send it over to, let's say, Nik Silver FX Pro, do the effect you want or the idea you want. Then when it comes back into Lightroom, do your sharpening after that, and you'll eliminate the glow. So keep that in mind. It's a really nice shot. It's kind of like, a nice vacation shot. And it's very well done, very well done. Beautiful sky. Like the colors. I like the composition. We kind of got this circle working right here. And it's really, really nice done. Really nicely done. This one too. I like this shot too. We do have this palm tree bleeding in over here, but I don't think you could have avoided that. You were at 18 millimeters. If you zoomed in, it probably wouldn't have been as strong of a shot. But you minimized it, so you did a nice job. Sky again is interesting. It's a really nice job. This shot here, I think this is one where I always say work the scene, because we have this sign here jutting out, and it's taken away from the shot. And of course these palms over here don't really add to the shot either. So I think here if you moved a little bit over to the left and zoomed in a little bit, you're at 18 millimeters now, and you just zoomed in a little bit and had this like part more dominant. Here, let's see if I could crop it. I didn't even think of that. Oh, let's go with something like that. See, something like that. Let's see. Bear with me. Yeah, something more like that. I think that's a lot stronger shot than that previous shot. So something like that, work the scene, get your, take a lot of, the shots are free nowadays when you're using digital cameras. Back when I started, we had, rolls of film that 24 or 36 exposures, and they cost $5, $8, something like that. Then we'd had to bring them in and get them developed, and now you could take as many as your memory card will allow you to. So work the scene and get some more shots, and I think you would have a stronger image than the one that we initially had here. Okay. This is a really nice shot too. I love the sky. I love the look of the weather, kind of impending weather. In this shot here too, let me see in the histogram. See, as I hover over here, see that blue? That all that part there is there's no data there. That's all inky black. So again, that's not so much your fault. The camera can't handle this strong, extreme dynamic range in this shot. We have these very light areas and these relatively dark areas, so something's going to suffer. So in this case, what I would suggest you do is, you did fine on the exposure though, is just go into Lightroom and bring the shadows up. Now watch, when I bring the shadows up, we get all this data back in here, but we do kind of lose some of the skies, kind of how strong it looked. But we could then now do, let's say, a graduated filter here, bring exposure down, and we could bring that back into the sky without affecting the grass here. So you could just make it to the degree you want. So then that's that. So we now opened up the shadows here, we brought it down here, so we have this real ominous looking sky. The other suggestion I would do is to add a vignette. I tell this all the time, and I'm going to show you now. Okay, so we added a vignette. We opened up the shadows. We did three things. We opened up the shadows. To get this, we added the graduated filter to bring back the ominous sky, and then I added a vignette. And what the vignette does, it helps somebody's viewing it. We want their eyes, their gaze, to fall towards the middle of the shot, and we don't want them like jumping around in the shot. We want them to smoothly fall towards the middle of the shot. Now here is the original image, and you can see we have these bright parts up here. When someone looks at a shot, their eyes will tend to go to the brightest areas right away. So we have these bright areas. Now once I did that, you can see the bright areas now have moved more towards the middle of the shot. So that helps someone comfortably look at the shot. They don't have to think, they just feel as they look at the image. So there's the before, and there's the after. We could do them side by side like that, so you get an idea what I'm talking about. It's a really nice shot. I like this shot. The kind of a crop. I would give it a little more room on this side. You could do maybe a square crop. There's a lot of labs, if you wanted to get this printed, that do square prints. So you would bring it out a little bit more, because this cruise liner is really close to the edge here. So bring it open a little bit. Again, we're just got some stuff that's really dark. And again, we have a huge dynamic range. We have these really light area up here and this really dark area here. So this might be another one where we could do the same thing that we did before, is we go down and we'll open up shadows a bit. And so we have more detail down in here. And then we could come in and put the graduated filter so we don't have this big bright area up here. Because we don't want people looking up here, we want them looking here. So we could bring in this graduated filter like that. Now I'm of course doing this real quick. You got to be a little more, bring up some contrast there. You could take your time and do a really much better job than I am. And then the third thing, which we did last time, is we add a vignette. And the vignette, again, it helps bring your gaze more towards the middle of the shot, as I mentioned about a zillion billion times. Why isn't that moving over? Okay, there we go. And there's the before, there's the after. Before, after. Of course, I did that really, really quick. You should take your time and, get it, so it is perfect. I mean, just take your time and you could really open the shadows up to the degree you like it, and bring the vignette down and maybe enhance the sky a little more with some color, whatever. Work the controls on Lightroom, and I'm sure you could really make this good shot a really outstanding shot. And I think that's it for Chris. Yep, that's the last one. And Chris, thank you very much for sharing your images with us. Some really, really nice images. Just a couple processing suggestions there. I think, some ideas too when you're photographing. Really the hardest thing to photograph when you're photographing animals is a black dog. They're really difficult to photograph. You did a really nice job on your dog. Just like I said, do those things especially if you're using a flash. Keep that in mind. You're going to have to use negative flash compensation. And when you're processing the image, or when you're taking a shot too, be mindful of the dynamic range in the scene. And remember that in post you're going to have to compensate one way or the other. You're going to have to open up the shadows, or you're going to have to tone down the highlights, one or the other. And remember too that when people look at a photograph, they tend to look at the brightest areas. So you want to do something in post, or when you're composing the image, so the brighter areas are more towards the middle and not towards the edges of the frame. All right, thank you very much, Chris. Again, I really do appreciate it. I'd like to thank everyone who watches all my videos. You guys don't know how much I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. When I started doing this, I just started doing this in July, and I thought maybe I'd have 10 or 12 people watching my videos, not as many as there are now. And I really am thankful. Thank you very much. If you guys have time, go over to my website, anthonymorganti.com. I got all kinds of photography stuff over there. And if you guys want me to critique your work, there's frequently asked questions on the website I finally put up there. Just look along the top. You'll see critiques-FAQ. It gives you instructions on how to send me images. And if you haven't already, if you guys could go over to YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel, I'd really appreciate that. And that's it for now. I'll talk to you guys soon.